I've been building workshops for the better part of a decade, which is a skill all in itself to learn how to build a workshop and facilitate it and get everybody in the room to feel safe and show up and really engage and have a great time while also making important business decisions.
You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast brought to you by focus-biz.com.
Welcome back to another episode. With us today is the founder of Profit Ladder, Jay Melone. He is the productized services guy. He's going to share his story about scaling a business without spending all of his free time marketing and selling to the point of burnout. Jay, so excited to have you here. Welcome on. How are you today?
Hey, Chris. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We always like to ask our guests about their entrepreneurial journey. What were you doing before, and how did that bring you into what you're doing today?
All right. I've been at the entrepreneurial grind for 15 years now. And even before that, I grew up as an entrepreneur's kid. Both my parents own their own business. My grandfather was a shoe cobbler that had a little shoe store in Verona, New Jersey. So I guess I've been indoctrinated. But I started my first business, which was different than Profit Ladder. It was called New Haircut. We were a web design studio. We started building websites and mobile apps and platforms. And eventually we got into product strategy and innovation. And as we sort of evolved, we went from working with little startups to larger companies, and eventually we're working with big companies like Google and Home Depot and Ford, great companies. Really exciting work. We got to create products that we were super proud of. So that business actually started in 2010. It actually still exists. I've just sort of shoved it in the background because I'm all excited about Profit Ladder these days, which I started October of 23. But that experience with New Haircut, building that over those 14 years is exactly what led me to Profit Ladder. So when I started the business, no one really gave me the cookbook to say, hey, by the way, when you open a business, you're also going to be the person in charge of marketing and selling all your stuff. I just thought like you hang the shingle, excited about the work that you do, and people are going to come kicking down your door. It's not exactly how it worked. And so what happened was that most surprising was that at first I was spending about half my time just beating the drum, trying to get people signed up. Even when we were first getting going with working with startups and selling super affordable stuff, even doing things at no cost or free, just to try to get business in the door, still had to convince and persuade and pitch. And when we got into selling to enterprise, that just got more complicated, longer, more of a cycle, more grueling, had to talk to more people in the organization. Most of my sales cycles were 18 months long or so. So I was selling to VPs and executives in these massive companies. Had to get to know them, had to build relationships with them, earn their trust, earn the trust of their sort of like second and third in command. And eventually just remaining top of mind through my newsletter, through social content, through email check-ins, through other things that I was less proud of, like spammy techniques, just to like get back in front of them. Eventually, if I got lucky, an opportunity would cross paths, and I'd be able to begin the process of pitching what I did. So then began the additional rounds of proposals and pitch meetings and getting buy-in from up and up in the organization. And I'm doing all that work. And meanwhile, I did have a team at a point where we were 35 people. They're doing all this work and they're sort of waiting for me to sign additional work. And so we would go through these like crazy periods of feast or famine. I started a business to do the work with the team, not to be the guy out selling the work. So I constantly had FOMO. I wanted to be in the projects with the team. So I would dip in, I would come and I would work with the clients, but then kick me to the curb. They'd be like, all right, you got to go find the next client so that we can all eat for the next 6 months or so. And then on top of it, our contracts were 3 or 6 months long. So needless to say, that was a sort of a hamster wheel that I sat on for 10, 11, 12 years. And around year 11 or 12, burnout started to creep in. And it got to the point where I now started to almost resent the market that I was selling to. Because when you get ghosted often enough by people that you've spent 2 weeks creating a proposal for and they don't get back to you, you start to build up your scales and your armor starts to go up. So around the year 20 ended, I started to ask myself, what would it look like if selling was easier to my customer? And that question is basically where Profit Ladder began. I wound up like creating a bunch of ways to package what I did as a service inside New Haircut, package them in ways that I could give them out to people. I could sell them to prospective clients, and it would sort of like bring them into my funnel. So by the time we got into a sales meeting, they were fully aware of the problems that I solved, how I solved them, if I was an expert, and if they thought that I was the person and with my team that we could solve their problems, which was grossly different in lots of good ways than just showing up to a pitch meeting and starting the conversation. So that whole journey and me figuring out a great way to solve it that didn't look like burnout and overwhelm and like doubling my hours is what led me to start Profit Ladder.
That is quite the journey, but I hear very similar stories from many other entrepreneurs. Maybe they're doing one thing for a while. They think there has to be something easier. They're starting to burn out. They're just trying to find easier ways, the path of least resistance. Some don't find it, or it takes them so long to find, but I'm happy that you were able to kind of crack that code earlier on. So that way you're like, this is what I need to focus on, and grow, which is really important. What is the productizing of services? Because I think creating that offer and wrapping it up in a way that communicates it well to the intended audience can be a challenge for
Mhm.
many. How do you like to handle that?
So the way I think about it is I basically just built my framework that I use today in Profit Ladder based on my experience. So I had a lot of services that were very active, high touch, very intense services that often look like 3 to 6 month long engagements. It was coaching, consulting, trading, a mixture of the three. And again, that question was, what would it look like if this were easier to sell from my side and easier to buy on my customer side? Because buying a 6 month long contract where you're going to innovate and you're going to hire a team that you don't know and you're going to make sure they're the right fit and find an opportunity that they can solve and then work through it and the research. It's a lot. There's a lot of steps in there. So that's not an easy thing to buy. And so we just kept asking ourselves, what would it look like to make this easier? And so we just basically stepped backward from our intensive high touch services. And the first thing we did is we packaged that into training. So we said, well, we get a lot of questions about a couple of the frameworks that we used. So what if we taught our customer and others? We didn't know who others were, but if there's interest in it, maybe we could just teach them our frameworks and maybe they'll do it themselves. And so we took a 6 month long thing, frameworks that we did, and we packaged it into 2 day training. And we got a lot of people that were super interested in it. It was pre-COVID, so it was in person. The first one that we ran was in Berlin. It was 2 days. We had over 30 people attend, and we made over 50 grand from that. And that was the kind of money that we made within like a 3 or 6 month contract with several people doing that service. So we were like, whoa, what's going on here? Our profits like skyrocketed. It was super easy for the customers to buy, very easy to facilitate. 2 days at first, four people running that training. Eventually it was 1 or 2 people running the training. So the profit margins just kept growing on it. And then that was kind of like, that was our entry point into productizing. Even though it was not a product, it was a package that you could buy. It was very easy. You're going to learn X, Y, and Z. It's 2 days and it costs $1,500 to come. So super easy. That's a really clear offer. So you asked, what does productizing look like? We just kept following that path. The next question we asked was, if we want to sell more of the training, what if we took one of the frameworks and we taught it in like a virtual setting? Because in the training, people would ask us, can we have the slides? Can we have these worksheets on the table? Can we have that template that's on the projector behind us? And I used to say, no, that's our IP. You can't have it. That's not part of the training. And eventually I said, well, what if we just started to say yes? So we took the training and we condensed it into a do-it-yourself version, which we called a toolkit, sold that for $250. And that was even easier to buy than the training. But then people would use the toolkit and want the full access to the training. So they'd sign up for the training. And then some people in the training would want us to come and just do it for them. So that sort of reverse flywheel. If our goal was to sell like our premium flagship offer, we just kept working our way backward to create smaller, easier to buy offers that like super high value, but easier to buy, less risk, less time investment for us and our customers. Eventually work your way all the way up to the top of the funnel where you're writing blog posts and newsletters and social content and whatnot. And that sort of like fills top of the funnel. And then people just, depending on where they are in their journey, they sort of navigate to the right offer.
That is amazing. That time you focus on the how do we make it easier to buy? How do we make it easier to sell? You took that 18-month cycle and shortened it, and now it becomes a 2-day event instead of a 3 to 6 month commitment. Plus, that's incredible. I think it's a testament to removing friction from the buyer's journey. The more difficult you make it, why is it this big process? You don't like it, they don't like it. Can't we just make this easier? How do I get your money easier? How do you get my product easier? You didn't change your service. It was just the way you delivered the exact same framework, which was really cool. I'm sure you did some adjustments to be more tuned to that, but I think just recrafting that offer was brilliant. I think that's what people need to focus on. So we just kind of take a step backwards so we can kind of figure out what we need to do. Are there any other tactics that have been super successful for you that you kind of teach through Profit Ladder you want other people to know?
Yeah. So most of the time, it's rare that you're going to have one offer and it's going to be a grand slam and you're going to get people like kicking down the door and thousands of people. But because most of your clients or customers are at different stages in their journey and finding sort of like the right entry point for them, that's something that I call a wedge offer, like the sweet spot between providing enough value, easy enough to buy, or even sometimes even free, that communicates trust to that person, but is a natural progression where they come to the thing or they use the thing or they buy the thing. And it's very easy for them to take that mental leap to say, this is the guy or the woman that I want to work with. And there's a natural progression to the work that you do, the premium sort of like consulting, coaching, training that you do. And that's hard to do because when I first thought about this, and a lot of the people that I work with, they will say something like, my program is 6 months and I'll be working with them to identify a 1 week offer. So I'm like, let's find a thing that you can deliver in 1 week. It's $2,500. I know that you charge 100,000 or 10,000 for this thing that you do. I want you to find something that's $1,000, whatever, 1 week, super easy. It does 3 things. It takes 3 sessions. And at the end, you get this important artifact or transformation or strategy. And that leap is super hard for people to do. And a lot of the time it requires somebody outside of our own brains to sort of pull that apart for you. The expression I always use in love is it's hard to read the label from inside the jar. So that wedge offer has been like this spark that people get really excited about. What I've actually found is that I'm actually doing this myself. I'm dog fooding this myself. I'm doing a 2-day training, which should be several $100s. And it's really uncomfortable, but I make it free. But I have like this heavy screening process to make sure it's high energy, high character people are coming into it. And I basically open up my playbook and teach them a huge chunk of the system that I would use to work with them one-on-one, not crappy teach you the what without the how. Like we actually get into it, you implement it, you're in a group of people with others. So finding that offer, whether it's a training event, whether it's a course, whether it's a do-it-yourself piece of content or guide that they can implement, that wedge offer tends to be the kickstart that really kind of ignites your flywheel. And that's the thing that I love finding with people.
That's huge. I think a lot of business owners who are struggling in the beginning, you can't give it away for free enough and you can't get them in. They're just struggling. But to pull it a piece of your current offer, what's that logical first step that they're going to receive value in versus easy enough to deliver? Then that's your foot in the door. And as you mentioned, it's just building trust over time that they are saying, hey, this is the person I like to work with and can see myself working with together.
It's kind of like that expression that I just rattled off inside the jar, reading the label. A lot of the time when I start working with someone, they're like, I need to invent something completely new to like fresh, something new and fresh and like novel. And I'm like, well, tell me about the work that you're doing today. I'm doing this stuff. How many times have you sold that? 20 times this year. Okay. How much money have you made? A couple 100,000. Okay. So why don't we figure out a way to repackage that into a smaller chunk version that is just easier to buy? And I get tripped up on that too. I'm going to go create like an assessment or a calculator or write a guide that's like an entirely new set of ideas. And now you talked about friction. Now I'm creating friction for that person to take what they learned from this and apply it to working with me one-on-one. So a lot of the time it's right under your nose. It's like, start with your high ticket offer and ask yourself the same question. What would it look like if I made this easier for me to deliver and for my customer to buy.
Yes, absolutely. And since you've been in business for 15 plus years already, I'm sure you've done every bit of marketing and sales tactic that is available. Over the past 1.5 decades, what have you realized is the most essential vehicle or communication piece for building those relationships? What really
Yeah.
moves the needle?
So I know the right answer is it's never one thing, but I do think there are things that we're more comfortable doing. Ways that we like to buy tend to be good ways to sell what you're offering. So if you like being cold called, then maybe cold calling is your thing. I don't like to be cold called. And so I don't like to do cold calling. But I have learned that doesn't mean that I can't hire someone that is great at maybe it's not cold calling, but being a little bit more outbound. Whereas my sort of mode of business building is inbound. In general, I like to create things that people love that draw them to me. And just the same, other people are the exact opposite. They're like, I want to find the person and dig through their problems one by one, and then I'll sell them the thing I have. So I do think it is a combination of the two that tend to work best. I think they sort of amplify each other. I have found, like in my experience, most entrepreneurs are one or the other. They're really good at one and less great at the other. So finding someone that you can partner with, I think overall, if I had to do one thing, it would be having a captive audience of people that are like looking for what you do. And so like, guest podcasting is a great thing to do because if you don't yet have a platform, showing up on other people's platforms who have a shared audience that you're building is a great way to be in front of other people. Webinars, but like good webinars, not hour-long sales pitches, because it's so powerful. I come from a product background, so research is sort of like groomed into me in terms of like finding great offers. Sitting on a webinar, giving all you've got in terms of value, and then asking people, why is this going to be hard? Where are you going to go next with this? What's a question that you have that's coming up for you? Why is it like hearing their objections to it and where they're getting stuck is one of the most powerful things that you can give to yourself. And there's so much more to be in a conversation with people that you just gave a ton of value to because they're going to open up. They're not going to feel like it's trickery or marketing. And it's so much more to hear it live than sending out a survey. So I love being in front of an active audience that is looking for my work. So there's different formats to do that. But yeah, that live and in person is tough to beat.
I don't think a lot of business owners realize the valuable feedback that we'll get from our leads and prospects and our customers and our promoters as well. A lot of those business relationships, if you ask them, what do you think about this? You have to ask those questions. Some will be willing to share with you, but you want to use that insight so you can give a better experience going forward. What pain points to address, what problems you're trying to solve. So you
Mhm.
can just have a better understanding of that bigger picture of what does my audience want and how do I give that to them? And I think webinars are a great way to don't make it that hour-long sales pitch. I despise those too, and those were so popular for the past decade or so.
Yeah.
But thankfully, people are more focused on the inbound strategy, which is the providing value through webinars, the newsletters, the content you're putting out there is building that relationship, establishing trust, and eventually that creates your customer base, which is incredible. Throughout the years, I'm sure you're a lifelong learner. Have there been really good either YouTube series, podcasts, books, authors you might recommend for other entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So I've been listening on and off to Alex Hormozy for a couple of years now. He gets to be intense after a while, just like Gary Vee. Like I can take them in doses and then I need to check out for a little while. I'm an auditory learner, so I love to go to the gym or I just took my son to a soccer tournament. So I listen to a bunch of podcasts and books. My attention span also sort of drifts. I think that's a superpower of being an entrepreneur, also a curse. So I tend to like the shorter form podcasts like those. What's another one that I've been listening to? I can't think of her name. I actually just attended a virtual training by a guy named Adam Flores, and it gave me the sort of clarity again, right under my nose. I've been building workshops for the better part of a decade, which is a skill all in itself to learn how to like build a workshop and facilitate it and get everybody in the room to feel safe and show up and really engage and have a great time while also making important business decisions. That is a superpower if you figure that out. And I had been running webinars, but it was more like presentation style with a little bit of Q&A and it felt off. And I listened to a training of his and his whole thing his sort of like wedge offer is doing a 2-day training event. And I was like, of course, that's what I need to be doing. And I needed to hear him say it. He has a totally different offer, but I needed to hear him and I attended it. Like he showed me and everybody else in there that number one, not only can you do something that takes a ton of your time that you can do for free, and there's a way to gate it. So he has a sort of a one-on-one check-in process to make sure everyone that joins is a good fit. But there's just a natural progression. The back offer of that is to join his mastermind, but he's given so much value in that 2-day training that it wasn't even a pitch, but I could definitely see when I do X, Y, and Z after coming to this training, of course, Adam's going to be the guy that I want to talk with about building my own mastermind. You can Google Adam Flores. He has Smart Business, something or other. It's a training that you can sign up for 2 days. You have to meet with him and his team one-on-one. And if he accepts you, you get in. And if you like being in front of an audience, and you have an offer, then he could help you find that sort of like training event that you get people excited, you teach them a thing, and then they'd be interested in your premium upsell.
Yes, absolutely. We always love more resources and just thoughts on different authors and people with knowledge and experts in their field. And I think this is a prime example that you love that service, that product so much from that gentleman that you're
Mhm.
happy to share his information, how you led through the process, and you're like, I know I was being sold to, but I was happy to buy
Yep.
because that connection and that trust that was built from that. For everyone interested in learning more about Jay, where can they find you online, get connected, find out more about your offer?
Yep. So profitladder.net. Currently, that is just free newsletter issues that I write about entrepreneurship, productizing services, reverse flywheels is the system you'll hear me talk about. And I'm always on LinkedIn. So that's my most active social media. You can find me there.
Very nice. We'll have links available down in the description and show notes for those who want to get connected. Jay, what's on the agenda for 2025? It's December and 24 right now. What are you building and working towards right now? It seems like you're really ramping up and you're kind of like ready to hit that next level. What's coming next for you?
Yeah. Well, so I'm really excited about this 2-day training that I'm doing. Like I said, it's that healthy mix of feeling uncomfortable all the time I'm putting into building it and what people are going to get out of it and the fact that it's free, but I'm excited about it. And on the back end of that, I have a program called the Profit Accelerator and I work with people one-on-one. They have a consulting or coaching service and I help them find that wedge offer that starts to spin their flywheel.
Very nice. That is fantastic. Any last parting words of wisdom for our audience out there, for the marketers, the business owners, entrepreneurs? You've been through it. You've gone through the struggle. You go through it. You have the wins, you have the losses. It's tough being a business owner. Wearing so many hats, but we feel more connected with other business owners as well. So we just like
Yeah.
to share that opportunity for everybody.
I just posted about this today. I changed topics and I used to only talk about impact, only talk about the mission that I was on and serving people. And I gave away everything. And I was afraid to really ask to charge what I was worth. And that cost me a whole bunch of burnout and very few customers. And so when I switched topics and changed company, and the name of my company is Profit Ladder, a lot of the people that had been following me for years told me that that switch made them uncomfortable, that I talk about money and I prioritize money. So what I would stress to the entrepreneur that's listening is that there's a false dichotomy between impact and income. You can have both. And I think if you treat money as fuel, then you can see it as a tool that will only grow the impact that you're able to have. So don't like get rid of all of the sort of toxic relationships that we have around money. It is a tool and you can use it.
Absolutely. Very well said, Jay. We appreciate it. Thank you again for coming on the podcast to highlight your journey and give us some tips and tricks. We appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Got it, Chris.